Hi everyone, I'm Cecilia from the HOJO office, and this is our workshop all about rental applications. Let me go sharing my screen for you. And here we are. Welcome to All About Your Rental Application. This is our agenda for today. So we're going to start with what is a rental application, then personal information and the two basic principles about this. What information can be asked, a little focus on credit check, what information you should always protect, and then we're going to go to some samples of problematic application. I'm going to propose you 3 different samples. We're going to talk about deposits and the commissions. So let's jump directly into what is a rental application. So some landlords will ask you to fill an application form in order to show your interest in renting the apartment they propose. And if your application is accepted, it becomes a legally binding document, and you have legally committed to sign a lease. That's why you don't want to sign multiple rental applications, because you are potentially committing to multiple rental agreements. Rental applications look like questionnaire forms where the applicant has to provide some information. And we're going to talk about personal information. So the law in Quebec limits the kind of information that a landlord can ask in rental application forms. And it follows 2 basic principles. The first one is the right to privacy. In whatever circumstances, privacy must be respected in obtaining the requested information. The act respecting the protection of personal information in the private sector defines the rule for the collection, retention, use, and communication of personal information. So the law is pretty strict on what can be done, how and why. And the other principle is the necessary character of the information collected. So Section 5 of the Act states that any person collecting personal information may collect only the information necessary to the object of the file. So the word necessary indicates the indispensable nature of an action, something that really cannot be done without those information. And landlords must ensure that they collect only the minimum information necessary from potential tenants. This being said, concretely, what information can be asked? Your complete name and current or previous address, contact information of your current or previous landlord to have information about your conduct as a tenant and the ability to regularly pay rent, your complete name, current address, and the date of birth in order to perform a credit check. So for your knowledge, landlords have the right to ask you to see a valid photo ID to confirm your identity, but they cannot make copies of your personal information. Now, let's talk about credit check, because I just mentioned it. So credit checks are a way for landlords to establish a tenant's payment habits. So if you're basically good at paying your dues. And for a credit check, the landlord needs to know the first and last name, the address and date of birth of the person. Your social insurance number is not needed at all. The landlord must also have your consent to perform a credit check. And for newcomers who don't have a credit history yet in Canada, there are other ways for you to prove your ability to pay regularly rent. You can provide a credit report from your financial institution, a letter of recommendation from the current or previous landlord, any other document attesting that you regularly pay your dues, like the phone bill, hydro bills, internet, these kind of things, or other relevant excerpts from a credit report. Another option for newcomers, especially international students, is to have a guarantor's letter attesting that you will be provided the money to pay rent in full and on time. A guarantor can be a parent, a family member, and it doesn't have to be Canadian citizen or to be in Canada physically. And your guarantor's information must be protected as well as yours. So let's take a look at the information that you have to protect. So landlords in Quebec cannot require you to provide them with your social insurance number, your driver license numbers, your health insurance card numbers, your passport, or your visa. Specifically, the social insurance number is issued by the federal government in Canada and essentially is for employment and taxation purposes. So your landlord doesn't need it at all. The commission, which is the authority that regulates the access to information, discourages the collection of this identifier because it is not necessary to the analysis of a leasing file. So it's really not needed to evaluate you as a tenant, as a possible tenant. Additionally, this number is the entry key to several government databases, so you really want to protect it. And again, it's not required for performing a credit check. Driver's license. This document can be used to confirm your identity, but the collection of the information and the numbers on it, it's really not necessary for a rental application or for a lease. And the same can be said about the health insurance card and the numbers on it. You can use it to confirm your identity or to access health and social services. But again, it's not needed for a lease nor for an application process. Your passport or visa, again, you can show the passport to confirm your identity to a prospective landlord, but the landlord cannot collect the information contained in these documents and cannot make copies of it. Moreover, prospective tenants are not required to mention their occupation, their employer's name, or the contact information of the employer, how many years they've been working in there, or their salary. All these information are not required for successfully do a lease. Now we're going to look at some samples of problematic application forms. So I'm going to show you sample number 1. So for purpose of privacy, we covered or deleted any names or referrals to private persons or entities, and we're just going to look at the kind of information required. So this is for the landlord to fill, this is for the potential tenant, so first and last name, and this is again for the landlord, and this is the kind of screening service that they are going to perform using this form in here. So they have to pay, and most probably might ask you to pay for this. For a single person, $12.50. For the spouse, so if you have a partner with you, it's almost $20. And that's the verification of the credit file, credit analysis through Equifax, and verbal written report. Is not too clear, the last one especially. Other kind of services are extensive verification within 1 to 3 business days, credit analysis through Equifax again, verification with the current landlord and previous one, job confirmation, file verification at the Régie, now it's called the TAL, it's the Administrative Tribunal regarding housing, as well as a civil and criminal record, and again, another written report. There are other services that they perform or the landlord access, employment verification, again, with the landlord, job confirmation, all of this, it's really not needed. And here in the important notice, really written in small, they say that the company is not responsible for false statement with regard to information appearing on the rental application form and is exempt from liability as the truthfulness and accuracy of the supplied and collected information. So they don't bother to check if the information they collect are even real, truth and accurate or not. Another page, so page 2 of this rental application, asks you here as an optional, but still it's not legally allowed, for your social insurance number, your credit card number, if you have a file or you had a file, more than one at the Régie du Logement, how many, and if you regularly paid rent on time in the last 5 years. Other than that, information on the current and previous address, as well as current employer or previous one, which, as we just saw, is not required for a rental application nor for a leasing process. And the other page, again, it's asking here for the same thing, social insurance number. If you have, again, a spouse, a partner, someone else with you renting the apartment, this is for them. And it's asking the same kind of information that, again, they don't need absolutely to have for successfully decide if you are a good candidate or not. We're going to look at sample number 2. This is sample number 2. Again, all information referring to who produced this application have been deleted. Application for rental, location of the building. In this first table, they ask for family name and first name, term of the lease, the rent, if a garage is needed, and then deposit immediately out of the blue. Who is going to be responsible for the hot water, the electricity. Let's focus on the deposit just a second, and then we're going to talk more about it later. Deposits are not legal in Quebec. The only kind of deposit that is legal in Quebec is first month rent to be paid upon signing the lease. But we're going to specifically look at it later. Here in the section references, we have a request of information about the previous or current landlord, Quebec driver license number. Again, they put it as optional, but they don't have the right to ask you for this. They're not required to provide such a thing. They cannot be. Same thing as the driver license goes for the social insurance number. The same is for your bank information. And again, occupation, name and address of employer. As we have seen, you are not required to provide this information for successfully do a lease for an apartment. And here again, in really small, they say hereby agree to sign regular lease of this specific place that we don't have a name for, according to clauses and conditions therein appearing, providing this rental application be accepted by the owner or its duly authorized representative within 10 days from the signatures of this present. Should this application be refused, the amount of unspecified deposit paid on account at this date will be reimbursed to the undersigned. In case of a withdrawal of my offer, my deposit will be lost. The translation of this sentence is, if for whatever reason I cannot take the apartment anymore, I will lose whatever deposit I paid already. The applicant waives any claim for damages by reason of non-acceptance of this application, which the owner may reject without stating any reason whatsoever for doing so. So you will not even have a good reason for which you have not been accepted. So this is sample number 3, rental application, application pour la location d'appartement, it's bilingual. In the first box says confidential, applicant name, date, SIN, so social insurance number, how much is the rent, if there's parking, occupancy date, number of people living in the dwelling, current address, complete with the landlord's name and the contact information, and then present employment. Again, this is not something that you are required to provide according to the law. So they want to know the company, how long you have been working there, contact information and address, what's the title of your position, how much you make per year, any other comment. And again, they have a small section down there in which they say the payment of first month rent is mandatory as a deposit. It will be applied towards the first month rent of occupancy. The deposit is non-refundable if applicant does not want the apartment. So again, if you refuse the apartment after being accepted, you lose what they consider first month rent if you're accepted, but it can be considered also a deposit somehow. However, the deposit will be returned if applicant is denied. I authorize such company that we will not name to obtain or exchange personal information with any personal information agent towards establishing or verifying financial standing. Again, you're not required to do any of this according to the law in Quebec. So after these 3 samples, let's talk about the commission for the access to the information. If you're ever asked to provide unnecessary personal information, you can file a complaint with the commission. The commission may, depending on the circumstances, provide the parties with the information required, conduct an inquiry, and recommend or order any appropriate measure to ensure the protection of the personal information. They literally are the authority regarding protection of private information. It is important to note that the Commission does not have the power to order a person to pay damages or compensation. The Commission's interventions generally lead to the adoption of more lawful practices. The important thing is that every practice regarding housing is done according to the law. And now let's talk a bit about the deposits themselves. As I said, Quebec housing law establishes specific limits to what landlord can do and cannot do. And when it's about deposits or payments of sum of money between landlords and tenants, tenants and landlords, the law establishes that a landlord cannot require a payment exceeding 1 month's rent, cannot demand advance payment of more than the first term of rent. So for example, in the case of a lease signed on April 15, but beginning of July 1st, the landlord can ask the tenant to provide a check cashable immediately for the first month rent only. So you can pay in advance only the first month rent. The landlord cannot demand additional amounts on deposits or in other forms, so no key deposits, for example, or no security deposit. That's another example. Landlord cannot demand depository checks. If a clause in the lease provides for such practices, it is invalid and the tenant is not obliged to comply with it. The tenant can apply to the tribunal to have his or her rights respected, for example, to recover his or her postage checks or deposits. And this is the end of our workshop. Thank you very much for participating in this presentation. If you feel like you need more information or guidance about rental applications, please email us at hojo@csu.qc.ca.